Magandang gabi po mga katipon sa Pilipinas. Ito po ang ating katipunan. Muling sumasa inyo mga tagapakinig upang magbigay ng mahalagang impormasyon, magbigay liwanag, at higit sa lahat makinig sa inyong mga daing at puro-puro hinggil sa mga problemang patuloy na nagpapahirap sa ating kalagayan at kabuhayan. Sa susunod na 2 oras, sisikapin po namin ipaliwanag ang iba-ibang bahagi ng ating ekonomiya at ang mga mabibigat na local and international issues na may malaking epekto sa ating buhay at kinabukasan. Ito po ang inyong katipon na si Butch Valdes. Kasama ang ating co-host dito na si Valdes at iba pa natin mga katipon mula sa Save the Nation Movement, Philippine LaRouche Society, at ang ating partido politikal na Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, KDP. Kami po dito ay nag-aanyaya sa inyo na makibahagi sa ating talakayan sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang problema at paghahanap ng kaukulang sa solusyon.
Ask not. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
Okay. That was the inauguration address. Part of the inauguration address, yung patapos na, of John F. Kennedy, 1961.
Yun, last week po, ang ating pong pinangako sa inyo ay tatalakayin po natin itong issue na itong buhay at kinamatayan ng Presidente John F. Kennedy. Siguro po marami sa inyo nakakaalala pa sa kanya. No? Pero siya po ay pinaslang noong 1963 na mga kung sino man na pumatay sa kanya. Pero bibigyan po natin ng diin ang ano niya, ang buhay niya sa mga ibang aspeto ng buhay niya at tungkol sa kanyang mga talumpati, no? Para makita natin kung paano nag-iisip ang tunay na leader ng bansang Amerika. Marami pong dumadaan na leader bago sa kanya at pagkatapos niya. Pero ito pong si John F. Kennedy ay bukod tanging pinag-iisipan niya ang kapakanan hindi lang po ng mga bansa, mga mamamayang Amerikano, kundi ang buong mundo. At nakikita niya ang katungkulan ng bansang Amerika sa buong mundo.
Right. Okay, I wanted to add lang, no. So last week, because we were talking about secret societies, natuloy yung secret societies, and then our talk on parang yung mga CIA and their involvement, lalo na with our own president, magsaysay, and sino yung mga tao dito behind. So this is probably the fourth week we're talking about this what we call the deep state and secret societies. And last week, yung iba sa inyo, they said, why don't we talk about the assassination and JFK? So in our during our research, sabi namin, definitely yung assassination, maraming questions. And honestly, tanga lang ngayon nag-iisip na hindi po naging conspiracy ang pagkapatay sa kanya. Okay, so but instead of delving fully, which we will touch on, of course, dito yung assassination niya and all the questions around it, we thought also ang maganda is to put it out there or to put the question forward. Bakit kailangan siyang patayin? O bakit kailangan siyang tanggalin? And in the course of this program, we will show some speeches, of course, cut medyo edited yung speeches niya, so it's shorter, and then we will discuss in the course of his presidency. Marami siya pong nagawa speeches, but these are the ones we picked. As you saw in the beginning, yung kanyang outlook, sabi nga ni Chairman, yung kanyang outlook ng President ng United States at the time. 1960, nanalo po siyang election. 1961, yung inauguration address. Sinabi niya po sa mga Amerikano, may responsibilidad tayo sa mundo. But we cannot do it alone. I cannot do it alone. I need your help as the American citizens, the Americans, to help me help the world. So sabi niya, ask not what we can do for you. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And to the citizens of the world, sabi niya, ask not what America can do for you, but what together we can all do for the freedom of mankind. So right then, yung policy direction po niya is to cooperate with all nations of the world. And I think that's part of the life of John F. Kennedy.
Ito yung si John F. Kennedy. Pinaslang po siya noong 1963.
Right.
3 taon pa lang siyang presidente noon. At maraming haka-haka kung bakit siya pinaslang. Pero nakikita nyo kung paano kanyang kadakilaan sa kanyang mga speeches.
Right.
No? At itong mga ganitong klaseng leader, talagang marami sila mga kalaban. Yung pong pinag-uusapan nating deep state ngayon,
Yes.
ay walang pinagkaiba dun sa mga grupo na naghangad o malamang nagplano na patayin si John F. Kennedy.
Right.
Mantakin nyo, si John F. Kennedy ay pinaslang noong 1963. No? Ilang taon lang yon ng pagkakatapos ng World War II. No? At nung panahon na yon na nanguna ang bansang Amerika sa pagdevelop ng mundo Meron silang presidente noon, ang pangalan si Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Right.
Yung Franklin Delano Roosevelt ay sana siya ang tutulong sa bansang Pilipinas.
Right.
Siya ang nagbigay at nag-commit ng kasarinlan sa Pilipinas, at ang plano niya talaga tulungan ang bansang Pilipinas umunlad kasi yun ang gusto nilang gawin na ehemplo ng kolonisasyon ng bansang Amerika, kasi wala na po silang ibang na-colonize na country dito sa parte ng mundong ito, kundi ang Pilipinas.
Right.
Ang gusto niyang gawin, bago nila iwanan, maunlad na ang Pilipinas. At pinadala niya yung mga mayuhusay na inhinyero niya, mga 1930s,
Right.
at dun sana niya tinutulungan na tayo maggawa ng mga infrastructure
Right.
para sa bansang Pilipinas. Ang nangyari pagdating ng 1941, 41,
Yes.
nagkagera po, no? Nagkagera at na
Antala.
postpone
Postpone.
ang development ng Pilipinas. As a matter of fact, dahil dumating yung mga Hapon, marami pang nasira na ginagawa ng Amerikano dito sa atin, papunta sa kasarinlan ng Pilipinas. Nung naantala itong nag-intervene ang gera, by 1945 naman, namatay si Franklin Roosevelt. At ang pumalit sa kanya, si Harry Truman, na presidente ng Amerika, na hindi masyadong
Medyo opposite.
kakaiba ang kanyang pag-iisip tungkol sa mundo at tungkol sa Pilipinas. At mayroong mga ginawa ito na talagang pati na yung pagpipigil ng pagbigay ng veterans pay sa mga Pilipino na lumaban sa Hapon bilang kasabwat o kasama ng mga sandatahan Amerikano, dahil tandaan niyo po, colony tayo noon. Gusto sabihin, under the American flag tayo lumalaban.
Right.
At sinabi ni Roosevelt, sige, kayo mga Filipino soldiers, magkakaroon ng parehong veterans pay ng mga Amerikano.
We will treat you as equals.
Pero hindi po ginawa ni Truman yan. Anyway,
But it's good. It's good to
it's
bring
good.
up Truman.
Kailangan malaman ninyo ang ginagawa. Now, si Truman, hindi nagtagal magpresidente kasi nagalit ang mga dahil sa kanyang pag-iisip na ginamit niya ang isang atomic bomb, nuclear bomb, at binagsak niya sa dalawang lugar, sa Nagasaki at Hiroshima sa Japan. Mayroon mga dokumento noon na ang Japan sumusurrender na sa gera.
Kasi pinaligiran na siya ni MacArthur.
Oo.
Wala nang laban yung Japan.
Wala nang laban Japan. Sumusurrender na sila. At tinatanong lang kung saan pwede magkausap para
mag-meeting
para surrender. Hindi na ayaw pakinggan ni Truman. Ang mas gusto niya, ibagsak yung bomba para ipakita sa buong mundo na may taglay ang Amerika ng isang bomba.
Isang mahiwagang weapon
Na
pinakamalakas sa mundo.
Malakas sa mundo na nakakapatay, mass destruction, weapon of mass destruction. Mas gusto niyang makita yon, at gusto niyang makita kung talaga nga maraming papatayin. At tunay, sa pagbagsak ng bomba sa Hiroshima, doon lang sa pagputok, 50,000 were dead. No? And then the same thing with Nagasaki, 50,000 were dead. But in 1 month, that whole two areas already had 500,000 dead dahil po sa
Nuclear
radiation. That was the very first time man used an atomic bomb versus man. Up to now, it has not happened again. No? Pero makikita nyo nung ginamit niya yan.
Yeah.
Ngayon, pagkatapos nitong si Truman, pumasok naman nitong si President Eisenhower.
Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Okay. Si President Dwight Eisenhower, nakita niya yung ginawa ng atomic bomb. At sinabi niya, hindi pwedeng ganyan ang imahe ng Amerikano sa buong mundo. Na gagamitin natin itong bomba pangtakot sa buong mundo. Hindi pwede yun. Kanya ang ginawa niya, gumawa siya ng isang programa, ang tawag niya doon, Atoms for Peace. Yung Atoms for Peace po, ang gusto niyang gawin nun, kunin niya yung teknolohiyang nuclear at ipakita niya sa buong mundo na pwedeng gamitin ito sa kaunlaran. Pwedeng gamitin ito sa agricultural development. Pwedeng gamitin ito sa production ng kuryente. Pwedeng gamitin ito sa panggagamot. At lahat pang kakailanganin ng tao para umunlad. Ang tawag niya po dito, Atoms for Peace. At sa iba-ibang lugar ng mundo, ipinakita niya ang kanilang intensyon na tumulong para maturuan ang mga mamayan ng ibang bansa kung anong ibig sabihin ng Atoms for Peace. Inalis niya sa isip ng tao na ang nuclear energy or atomic energy ay pangpatay lang. Ang gusto niyang ilapasok yung nuclear energy, atomic energy ay develop ng mga ekonomiya at ng mga bansa. Dahil dyan, binigyan niya tayo ng tulong at naipatayo na nila dito dahil pumayag po ang ating pamahalaan noon na magtayo ng nuclear reactor. Maliit na nuclear reactor. I think it was a 3 megawatt reactor na nandito po sa malapit sa University of the Philippines. Hanggang ngayon po, andyan yun. Kanya lang, hindi na po pinapatakbo dahil kay Corazon Aquino. Pero bakit yan meron? Pang-research, paggawa po natin ng ating matututunan kung paano natin magagamit ito para sa ating kaunlaran. Hindi po pinaandar din ni Corazon Aquino yan. No? At ngayon, nandyan lang yan. Pero nagre-research pa rin tayo, pero hindi umaandar yung reactor. No? Ngayon, pinamunuan ngayon ni Dr. Carlos Arcilla, isa pong dalubasang scientifico ang nagpapatakbo ngayon. Pero balik tayo dito, yan ginawa po ni President Dwight D. Eisenhower para maalis sa imahe ng mundo na ang Amerika dinuduro ang buong mundo na sige, pag hindi kayo sumang-ayon sa amin, bobombahin namin kayo. At ganito yung aming sandata. Yun ang ayaw na ayaw niya because ang prinsipyo po niyan, might is right. No? Kung ano lang ang gugustuhin namin, dahil meron kaming malaking bomba, no? Kailangan sundin nyo. Yun ang pinapalitan ni Eisenhower. At sumunod naman sa kanya ay si John F. Kennedy. Ito nga ang pagdating ni John F. Kennedy, ang isang malaking maski 3 taon lang siya, malaking impact po ang nangyari sa buong mundo sa pagpasok ni John F. Kennedy. Ito po ang ating pag-uusapan ngayong gabi.
Right. So, going back to Dwight Eisenhower po, we have a clip of his farewell address to the nation, but also a warning for future presidents. So, si Eisenhower po, kita nyo, he was also a general during the war. And nakita niya, ang paglaki na itong tinatawag na military-industrial complex. And he was warning that it shouldn't take over policy of the US government. Kasi lumalaki at lumalaki na siya. And since they developed the nuclear and atomic power weapon as a bomb, sabi niya, medyo delikado to para si humanity.
So, explain natin ito sa military-industrial complex. Ito po ang pagkakuntsaba ng mga pangangalakal, mga private sector, mga big businessmen, at ang mga may mga bata sila sa sandatahan sector ng Amerika. Yung mga ibang mga officers ng Amerika. May kakuntsaba sila yan. At gumawa silang tinatawag ni Eisenhower na military-industrial complex. Na ang kanilang gagawin, lahat ng sandatahan ng pangangailangan ng Amerika, panggera sa ibang sila ang umahawak. Kanya yan ang importanteng malaman po natin.
Yeah. So Eisenhower, sabi niya po, tama daw may standing army tayo, tama daw may standing military, pero medyo lumalaki na ang kapangyarihan nitong mga to. So, based on what we know of history and what we know that Eisenhower, yung sinasabi ni Eisenhower dito sa mga speeches niya, nakikita niya and the influence as a president, you see the influence surrounding. I just want to go back also quickly. Yung FDR po, si Franklin Roosevelt, ang pumapaligid sa kanya, hindi mga deep state. He surrounded himself with loyal patriots ng America that do not want perpetual war. Pagpasok ni Truman, ang pumapaligid sa kanya, lahat ng deep state operatives. Isa na doon, si Bernard, the philosopher, si Bertrand Russell, who advocated that we need population control and we need to show that countries will be frightened if there is one country that has the most terrible weapon. That is a deterrent for war. So, na-influensya po si Truman dyan at binomba niya yung Japan. Pampakita lang kasi like Chairman said, there was no need to bomb to use that weapon. Now, when Eisenhower came into office, nakita niya yung itong mga deep state, yung mga general, yung mga gano'n, na gusto manggera pa rin.
So, ginawa nila kasing negosyo ang Amerika.
Right. They built up a whole industry.
Na ang gera.
Oh.
Gagawin nilang malaking negosyo,
Right.
ang panggagera.
Right. So, Eisenhower, sabi niya, so as a president, pasok ka sa office, ang pumapaligid sa'yo, ang siyang mag-aabiso sa'yo. Not unlike now, right? Every president, hindi mo alam kung sino yung trusted mo, kung sino yung... Pero nag-aabiso. So, si Eisenhower, nung palabas na siya ng office ng president, mag-issue siya ng warning. It's a speech, it's a long speech, but we got the excerpts that we need, and then we will react to it after. Ito po yung speech.
The record of many decades stands as proof that our people and their government have, in the main, understood these truths and have responded to them well in the face of threat and stress. But threats, new in kind or degree, constantly arise. Of these I mention two only. A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime. or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
You have to comment on that. He had a lot of things to say there, a lot to unpackage there. And I will try to...
Nagbibigay lang po siya ng konting kasaysayan kung paano nag-evolve ang bagong Amerika pagkatapos ng gera. Kasi sabi niya, bago po ng gera, wala daw manufacturing ng weapons industry ang Amerika. Dahil lang nagkaroon po ng gera, napilitan silang mag-manufacture ng mga weapons, no? Kasi meron na silang mga umaandar na industriya na ginamit nila imbes na gumagawa ng kotse o gumagawa na ngayon ng truck o mga tangke at mga ganyan po ang ngayon pagkatapos po ng gera meron industriyang may ganitong kapasidad. At ang sinasabi niya, ano ang gagawin natin dito? Ang nangyari daw ay hindi daw nila binuwag itong industriyang ito dahil na sa kanilang paningin kailangan daw na yung
mag-build up ng
manatili yung ganitong kanyang capacity. Dahil po dito na ang mga tao nag-iisip na ng mga iba-ibang bagong sandata ang pwedeng gamitin, na pwedeng gamitin sa darating na ano. At dahil napakamahal po ng research nito, nahanapan nila ng paraan para ang gagastos dito sa research para dito sa mga bagong gamitin sa mga iba-ibang klaseng gera ay ang gobyerno. At dahil dito, nagkalapit na ngayon itong mga industriyang pribado, tsaka ang bansang Amerika, dahil ang bansang Amerika, government, had the money to pay for their research. And this started to put them together. No? Yan po ang sinasabi niyang raking pagkakaintindi. At binibigyan niya ng konting perspektibo ang pag-develop nitong sasabihin niya ngayon.
Yeah, so exactly that. Tapos ang sinabi niya po sa huli, wina-warn po niya. Sabi niya, intindihan naman natin, tama naman. And yung tama naman na kailangan mag-develop tayo ng armed forces who are best equipped with the best technology. That's fine. Pero ang nangyayari ngayon, hindi na po yung presidente o hindi na yung mga liderato ang nagdidikta kung papasok tayo dito sa gera o hindi. Ang lumalakas ng impluensya, itong mga tao within the military-industrial complex, which includes the generals, the officers, the armed forces, plus the industry titans, yung kanilang corporate giants who are manufacturing these things. So ito yung impluensyang pinapalabas nila sa presidente. Now, you have to understand also, after the World War II, nung pumasok si Truman, ang umiiral na environment, itong tinatawag nila, ang gusto nilang itulak ay yung Cold War. Yung Cold War environment na kalaban natin itong Russian. Yung communist, socialist, Marxist versus capitalist. Ito yung sinabi ni Churchill sa isang speech during the 1950s. Sabi niya, Iron Curtain will divide the world. On one side is Russia, the other side is the free peoples. This is our division. So buong taon yan, everybody was hyping the Cold War. And ang sinasabi nila ng mga general at yung military-industrial complex with the media, they were saying we have to build up our arms. This is the environment.
Yung parang pananakot na ginagawa nila na ang kalaban daw yung mga Soviet Union, mga bagong pag-iiral nitong mga ideolohiyang ito.
Right.
At kinakailangan paghandaan. Going back to that, yung private sector, mga industriya, pag meron silang gustong ibenta na bagong klaseng teknolohiya sa panggera, ang unang-una po nilang kakausapin kasi yung mga general, hindi naman yung presidente.
Right.
At yung mga general lang mismong magsasabi, ito pwede yan, ito hindi magagamit, ito uhubra yan, ito hindi. Kanya po nagkaroon ng natural na pagsasama,
Partnership.
itong mga general, no? Na
Military.
Tsaka itong mga industriya. Kanya nagkaroon ng military-industrial complex.
Right.
No? At napakalakas po nila dahil ang perang pinag-uusapan dito ay napakalaki. Ang sabi niya, noon pa lang, sabi niya, yung buong net income ng mga industriya sa
1961 pa yan.
sa Amerika, no? Siya yung naging budget ng defense ng military.
Sabi niya, mas malaki pa yung ginagastosan nila
Oo.
kaysa sa buong corporate America.
Income.
Income. Grabe.
Kanya napakalaki po. At since malaking pera,
Yeah.
kung ikaw yung negosyante, industriya, tapos ikaw yung
Oo.
general, madali pong gumawa ng kikitain mo.
Oo,
Pero-
kickback, mga ganun.
Pero ang kinakailangan mo, meron palagi kang pinaggagamitan ng sandata mo.
Right.
Yung gegerahin mo yung mga ibang lugar
Right.
para meron kang ginagamitan ng mga sandata.
Yeah. At
na
saka
ginagawa.
isa pang telling from that speech. Sabi niya, yung armed forces daw niya ngayon, 1960s, 50s and 60s, is so different from the armed forces that we grew
Yeah.
up with. Those who fought in World War II. Iba na yung character daw. Kasi parang gusto nila maggera. Tayo, nanggera tayo kasi napilitan tayo pumasok. So we had to ramp up our production, change the production, retool, and then put that. But not preparing for war all the time.
Right.
Yan ang sabi niya. Kaya natatakot. Nakikita mo yung kanyang speech, si Eisenhower, parang natatakot siya. Masyado daw grabe yung impluensya ngayon ng mga to. And they want to scale up the production of war and then may takot. So, fast forward tayo. That was his farewell speech. And the incoming president, John
Pero
F. Kennedy.
hindi lumabas yung military. Lumabas pa.
Lumabas, yeah. He warned of the military-industrial complex. And then sabi niya rin, yung telling daw, nakita daw niya, yung mga universities daw, which were the wellspring or the fountainhead, sabi niya, of ideas and inventions and scientific discoveries, became contractors for research of government.
Right.
Meaning government and the military-industrial complex was pouring in money for certain areas in development para mag-research tong mga researcher na dapat independent discoveries. So it became parang servicing the military-industrial complex.
So lumaki to.
Right.
Alam nyo, like I said, malaking pera. Pero kung minsan, yung mga budget niyan, kinakailangan aprobado ng Senado
Right.
o ng Kongreso. So, sino pong pagbibigyan nitong mga grupong to? Siyempre, yung mga Senado, iko-corrupt nila at saka yung Kongreso para maaprubahan yung malaking budget.
Right.
Kanya ang presidente na hindi niya mapigil dahil dun sa sistema na ganito ang ginagawa. No? Kanya nagwa-warning na siya si Eisenhower, pag-ingatan nyo itong military-industrial complex.
Right.
No? Malaking kapitsala ang gagawin nitong mga taong ito.
And his
Sa
move to
sa-
counter was Atoms for Peace.
O yun.
Kasi sabi niya, masyado tayong sa war, this is dangerous because nuclear war will destroy all of us. Sabi niya. So we need to curb it and say, look, we need to get nations involved for civilian use of nuclear power.
Nuclear power.
Yun ang nag-start ng nuclear
Kasi
power.
at that time, Amerika lang ang meron nuclear power.
Right.
Wala pang nuclear power yung mga Russia. Hindi pa nila nagagawa. Naunang Amerika dyan.
Yes, and there's documentation na yung mga general, sinasabi nila kay Eisenhower, atakihin na natin yung Russia ngayon at yung iba, patayin na natin kasi wala silang capacity,
Walang kakayanan.
mag-nuclear power, tayo lang. And we came out of World War II, tayo yung number one superpower sa mundo.
Mamamahalan ng mundo.
So, ganun sila, pinudyok nila yung presidente. So, that's why Eisenhower was cornered. Parang sabi niya, worried na, nako, ito na yung power. They have their designs. They had the Korean War, and then they were going into Vietnam against communism. So, that's Dwight D. Eisenhower. And Dwight D. Eisenhower and ang sumunod na presidente, si John F. Kennedy, became very close because John F. Kennedy would always consult Eisenhower, especially on matters of national security. Kinukwentohan niya about the Russians. And online, there's a JFK library. Ewan ko kung edited lahat yon, pero yung mga conversation nila ni Eisenhower na declassify na. So you can listen on certain things. So, come forward, there was this young, very charismatic senator from, I think it's Boston yata, Senator si Kennedy, Massachusetts, who was the star of the Democratic Party. And he won the presidency in 1960 against Richard Nixon. He lost to Nixon lost to him. So he won, and he was very youthful. I'm not sure how old he was when he
41.
41. Really? Only 41. Very youthful, with a beautiful wife. Maganda po yung pasok niya sa America, JFK. So he presented parang a vision of what the future should hold, and it should not be conflict. And yung mga speeches niya, yung mga kanyang mga foreign policy, gusto niya cooperation and peace and development ng buong mundo. And one of his speeches, it shows that he knew more kung sino talaga yung kalaban ng mundo. In this speech, he talked about secret societies. He didn't mention CIA specifically, not in this speech, but he was addressing the American Newspaper Publishers Association. So there's an excerpt of this speech. It's audio lang, pero may text na kasabay. Ito po, nahanap natin sa YouTube kasi tinanggal na yung totoong speech. So nahanap natin, na-research natin, i-save nyo to. But this is the speech where he said there is a body, or he didn't mention military-industrial complex or CIA, pero sabi niya he understands there is a organization or something that's influencing world events.
My topic tonight is a more sober one, of concern to publishers as well as editors. I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike. That the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use, have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power. It was early in the 17th century that Francis Bacon remarked on three recent inventions already transforming the world: the compass, gunpowder, and the printing press. Now the links between the nations, first forged by the compass, have made us all citizens of the world, the hopes and threats of one becoming the hopes and threats of us all. In that one world's effort to live together, the evolution of gunpowder to its ultimate limit has warned mankind of the terrible consequences of failure. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
All right, so that was an address to in 1961, the address to the American newspapers published again, this was at the height of the Cold War. And although he seems to be referring to communism and the rise of Russia as a conspiracy, no? He also referred to secret societies that's not being addressed, and that we don't like secrecy, secret rituals, and secret agreements without the American people knowing. So a lot of the people take this as something that Kennedy understood, at least not outright, he couldn't say, but in regards to the press, or how the press can be manipulated and used against government.
Well, he was referring to the nature, precisely as Itos was saying, that the U.S. has been established as a democratic country, that it abhorred anything that referred to something secret. So secret societies, secret organizations, secret methods were something that naturally is rejected by the people in the United States. On the other hand, he presented precisely this irony, that the kind of war, he didn't say Cold War, that the kind of war that they were in was such that the enemies of the United States, which was, he was referring to, of course, the Soviet Union, Cold War kasi ito, nagagamitan nila ang pagka, they were able to exploit the nature in the United States of being very open. And that he referred to the many things that are, anything that needed to be known could be published by the newspapers and so on and so forth.
Under free speech.
Under the free speech. But sabi niya, there are others that are not friendly to the United States that can exploit this. And he was referring precisely to the media or the press, that they should be more circumspect from now on about what to publish and what not to publish, because what they publish can very well be used by their enemies. And so there was this irony of saying we have to promote some sort of secrecy in order to protect us. At the same time, why? Because of those that are against them. But in the same way, he also said the freedom-loving people of the U.S. are against anything that means secret. So he was in effect trying to get this understood by the people, wherein if it means national security, it means there are certain things really that have to be kept under wraps, because the enemies of the U.S. may exploit this. Yun ang kanyang direct message.
Right. So this was 1961. This
Yes.
is, but already they were forming a plan for Cuba, what they call the Bay of Pigs invasion. And Kennedy was suddenly thrust into that situation where he had to deal directly with Russia. Kasi po yung Russia nagbibigay ng armas o naglalagay
was planning to put up missile silos in Cuba. And Cuba is just not too far from 90 miles away from the US.
From Miami.
Tapos maglalagay sila ng nuclear rockets dyan. At sabi ng Amerika, hindi, this will be a threat to us. Kaya nagkaroon ng crisis. Almost magkagera.
Tapos nandun, may standoff, di ba? I think chairman was in school at the time. College was he, or high school? Like 1962.
Yes, I was in high school, but I still remember that the whole world was nervous
Kasi
about
nuclear war
a
yan.
nuclear war starting. And our understanding of an atomic war or nuclear war
Right.
was such that it was going to destroy the world.
Hiroshima
Yeah,
and
Hiroshima.
Nagasaki.
It
So
was,
yun ang,
it was coming from that.
oh,
And that
yung fear.
the bombs that they were going to be used was even much more
Powerful.
powerful than the. So the U.S. was put in a spot, and they were really
Yeah.
about to go to war. Even
Right.
the whole U.S. Were already prepared.
Right.
Dahil nagpupumilit yung mga Russians, si Khrushchev,
Mm.
padala yung mga vapor na ilalagay dun sa Cuba.
Yeah.
Tapos ang Amerika sabi, pag naglagay kayo dyan, gera tayo.
Yeah, no,
No? Tapos nagpumilit pa rin si ano.
Mm.
Ang ginawa ni Kennedy, naglagay siya ng blockade.
So Navy ship.
Harap-harapan sila. Nagkatutukan.
Mm.
No?
Imagine.
Tapos sabi nila, mag-advance pa kayo,
Oh,
um,
we will fire.
barilan na tayo. No?
Mm.
Gusto sabihin, gera na nga. No?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nagkatutukan ganyan. At buti na lang, after a while, umatras na ngayon yung Russia at bumalik na. At hindi tinuloy yun.
Right.
Pero that was what, those were maybe 2 days, 3 days of very scary periods. No?
Right.
And probably the most trying for a U.S. president ever at the
Oo.
time. No?
Bagong-bago pa lang siya. What? 43 years old?
Yeah.
So, getting to that point na ano. Tapos, iba pa yung Bay of Pigs invasion, di ba?
Yeah.
Iba pa yon because may plano tong military-industrial complex na mag-invade ng Cuba. Marami pong discussion on that, but we will not tackle that too much now. It just goes to show that what Kennedy did and what he was thrust into
Yeah.
the situation.
You remember, this guy was just a 42 years old, 40 guy. No? And then he was matching brains and guts with this guy Khrushchev,
Veterano,
who was a veteran
yeah.
intelligence officer and
Right.
so on and so
KGB.
forth, KGB, and he became now the head of Russia. No? And patigasan sila.
Mm.
Ini-small pa nga siya ni
Khrushchev,
Khrushchev
right.
nung batang ito na ganito. No? Pero nagkatutukan talaga sila. At kala ni Khrushchev, baliwala yung threat ng Amerika na natutulakan niya. So, yung dalawa, yung si Kennedy tsaka yung kapatid niya, nag-usap. No?
Right.
Si
Robert Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy.
Right.
Tapos parang wala nang solusyon. Sabi niya, hindi, i-blockade mo. No? So, pinadala niya yung naval blockade niya at nagkatutukan. At least, sabi niya, kung magkakagera, no? Maghandaan na natin, unahan na natin kung talagang magkakagera. Buti na lang, umatras ang Russia kasi ang dami ng weaponry ng Amerika noon, no? Lamang na lamang ang Amerika sa Russia. Bagamat meron na silang nuclear weapons, hindi pa kasing dami ng Amerika nung nangyari yan.
It was a test because again the Cold War and they were hyping up the Soviet Union. But we fast forward. So after this situation, 1963, June 10, 1963, he gave a speech about having peace as a lasting solution with everybody around the world. And this was in one of the universities, I think, and sabi niya, this was one of the most iconic speeches. And I think it showed the real, this is the peace speech, right? Okay. And it showed where he stood. And again, on one side, where he stood for humanity, the leader of the free world. And on the other side, gives you a clue as to why he had to be removed by the deep state.
At tandaan nyo, June was just a few months before he was assassinated.
Right.
No?
November 22, 1963, yung assassination.
Yeah.
Ito, June.
And these speeches that he will be saying before he may have probably been the
Last straw.
last reason, no, last straw, why these evil people had to kill him.
Okay, sige.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace because of the new face of war. Total war makes no sense in an age where great powers can maintain large and relatively invulnerable nuclear forces and refuse to surrender without resort to those forces. It makes no sense in an age where a single nuclear weapon contains almost 10 times the explosive force delivered by all the Allied air forces in the Second World War. It makes no sense in an age when the deadly poisons produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of the globe and to generations yet unborn. Today, the expenditure of billions of dollars every year on weapons acquired for the purpose of making sure we never need them is essential to the keeping of peace. But surely the acquisition of such idle stockpiles, which can only destroy and never create, is not the only, much less the most efficient, means of assuring peace. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task. Some say that it is useless to speak of peace or world law or world disarmament, and that it will be useless until the leaders of the Soviet Union adopt a more enlightened attitude. I hope they do. I believe we can help them do it. But I also believe that we must re-examine our own attitudes as individuals and as a nation, for our attitude is as essential as theirs. And every graduate of this school, every thoughtful citizen who despairs of war and wishes to bring peace should begin by looking inward, by examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War, and towards freedom and peace here at home. First, examine our attitude towards peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it is unreal. But that is a dangerous, defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man, and man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable, and we believe they can do it again. Second, let us re-examine our attitude towards the Soviet Union. It is discouraging to think that their leaders may actually believe what their propagandists write. It is discouraging to read a recent authoritative Soviet text on military strategy and find on page after page wholly baseless and incredible claims such as the allegation that American imperialist circles are preparing to unleash different types of war, that there is a very real threat of a preventative war being unleashed by American imperialists against the Soviet Union, and that the political aims, and I quote, of the American imperialists are to enslave economically and politically the European and other capitalist countries and to achieve world domination by means of aggressive war, unquote. Truly, as it was written long ago, the wicked flee when no man pursueth. Yet it is sad to read these Soviet statements, to realize the extent of the gulf between us. But it is also a warning to the American people not to fall into the same trap as the Soviets, not to see only a distorted and desperate view of the other side, not to see conflict as inevitable, accommodation as impossible, and communication as nothing more than an exchange of threats. No government or social system is so evil that its people must be considered as lacking in virtue. As Americans, we find communism profoundly repugnant as a negation of personal freedom and dignity. But we can still hail the Russian people for their many achievements in science and space, in economic and industrial growth, in culture, in acts of courage. Among the many traits the peoples of our two countries have in common, none is stronger than our mutual abhorrence of war. Almost unique among the major world powers, we have never been at war with each other, and no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland, a loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago. Today, should total war ever break out again, no matter how, our two countries will be the primary target. It is an ironic but accurate fact that the two strongest powers are the two in the most danger of devastation. All we have built, all we have worked for, would be destroyed in the first 24 hours. And even in the Cold War, which brings burdens and dangers to so many countries, including this nation's closest allies, our two countries bear the heaviest burdens. For we are both devoting massive sums of money to weapons that could be better devoted to combat ignorance, poverty, and disease. We are both caught up in a vicious and dangerous cycle, with suspicion on one side breeding suspicion on the other, and new weapons begetting counter-weapons. In short, both the United States and its allies, and the Soviet Union and its allies, have a mutually deep interest in a just and genuine peace and in holding the arms race. Agreements to this end are in the interests of the Soviet Union as well as ours, and even the most hostile nations can be relied upon to accept and keep those treaty obligations, and only those treaty obligations, which are in their own interest. So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
Ang galing. Ang galing talaga.
Galing po na. Nakakamiss po yung ganyang klaseng mga leader, lalo na po leader ng Amerika. Tagal na po natin hindi nakakarinig ng ganyang klaseng tao na leader. Definitely dito sa Pilipinas, wala po tayong ganyan. No? Pero sana po sa Amerika, na siya ang supposed to be leader of the free world. No? Meron mga ganyang klaseng leader. Pero yung leader nila ngayon ay,
Opposite.
hindi lang may kapansanan. No?
Yeah, I don't think he's in control.
Kapansanan.
Okay.
Marami pong at
That's another question.
hindi po ganyan ang kanilang mga vision at pananalita. No? Wala po silang ganyan direksyon.
Yeah.
Anyway, nakakalungkot po. Pero hindi ibig sabihin we are all hopeless. Dahil isa po yan sa pinapakita natin
Yeah.
para nga maunawaan natin na pwede natin isipin ito. No? At pwede natin pagpatuloy ang mga nasa intensyon nitong mga ganitong klaseng tao. No?
Right. I wanted to add quickly. This was following po yung event, yung malapit na magputukan na war. So this was in 63 already. 62 po yung nangyari yung blockade. Tapos he is talking about and inatrasan siya ng isang superpower na Russia. And instead of calling for more from Russia, he is telling them, usap tayo, let's have peace, let's not do this anymore. Delikado yung mundo. Sabi nga niya, we have armaments, everything we built up, both nations, both countries and all of our allies, everything we built up for so long will be obliterated in 24 hours. By nuclear missiles. Kung itutuloy natin to. In other words, he's saying, usap na tayo. Huwag tayo magpapunta doon. Gusto natin peace, not for our time, but for generations hence.
And he was addressing himself maybe to the Soviets, but at the same time, he was telling his audience na American students graduating.
Right.
Kinakailangan, sabi niya, huwag kayong manatili dito sa pag-iisip na tungkol sa palaging may kalaban. Kinakailangan ang pag-iisip nyo as the young people will be towards how to generate conditions to make peace.
Right.
No?
Right.
Tapos sabi niya nga, in the final analysis, we all are humans.
We all inhabit.
We breathe the same air, sabi niya ganyan.
Yeah.
And that we are all mortals, no? Mamamatay din tayo, no?
Yes. Yeah.
So, why don't look for ways how to cooperate and instead of killing each other. Tama na yung rhetoric. Ang nakakalungkot, sabi niya, yung communication daw, yung isa nagte-threaten.
Yeah.
Tapos yung isa nagte-threaten.
Kasi babawi siya.
Tapos sabi niya, hindi ganyan
Dapat yun.
ang communication.
Yeah.
Ang communication dapat towards peace. No?
Yes.
Tingnan niyo po itong taong to.
Quality of mind, no?
He's talking about world peace. And he's even almost like extending his hand to the Russians. Let's talk. Let's talk. We might not agree on some things
in our lifetime.
but at least let us talk so that we will
Future generation.
hindi magkakagera habang nag-uusap, something like that.
Right.
At ito po yung kanyang direksyon. Tapos this was June, so November 1963 they killed him. No?
Yeah, we have one more speech that he did in November 17 with the UN, at the UN, his final address at the UN, where he again said, tama na tong Cold War. And remember po, and now a lot of these declassified documents came out recently about Kennedy and his time, kasi puro mga classified na at that time. And because of the Freedom of Information Act sa US, people are now getting all of these materials, yung discussions, telephone calls, all of these correspondences through letters. And he was fighting his own generals. He was fighting his own military-industrial complex that were pushing him to what they call pressure advantage against Khrushchev and against Russia. And saying, gerahin na natin, wag kang ano. Tapos sinasabi, duwag ka ba? May ganun mga exchanges na bakit ayaw mong anuhin si Khrushchev. And this was the quality of mind of this person, this US president.
Yan ang kalaban niya. Yung mga sa Amerika, meron din mga grupong gustong manggera kasi lamang sila eh.
Yes.
Lamang naman tayo, unahan na natin ngayon.
War hawks, di ba?
War hawks. Ayun ang siya, as a matter of fact, it was about this time that he had one other speech at one time saying na itong CIA na ito,
Yes.
pag nagkaroon akong pagkakataon, sabi na, puputul-putulin ko ito in 1,000 different
I will
pieces.
splinter it into 1,000 pieces.
I will splinter it in 1,000 pieces. Bubuwagin niya kasi yung CIA kasi alam niya na ang mga CIA, ang kanilang ginagawa ay regime change
Right.
at assassination tsaka itong mga spy, no? Na nakakasira lang talaga sa galaw niya papunta sa kapayapaan.
Yes.
This is what he said, and he knew
No.
that this CIA and the FBI
Right.
were precisely doing this,
Yeah.
and he wanted to tear it down.
Yes.
No?
Yung speech na yan na narinig namin long ago. And hindi ko mahanap sa YouTube. Baka some of you can look for it, hanapin natin because parang tila yatang tinanggal nila yung mga ganyang speeches ng mga dati, no? Ine-edit na nila. But we heard it in his own voice. Personally po, narinig po namin. And he really went after these secret societies. And he was warning and he was well aware. Alam na po niya kung anong nangyari. So, kita mo yung quality of mind. Sabi niya, ayoko manggera. Remember po, ang military-industrial complex, they need war to make money. They need the threat of war so that they can sell to the US, not just the US, but to its allies. Oy, kuha kayo nito. Bilhin nyo yung old airplane namin. Bilhin nyo yung tangke namin. Para kasi pag pumasok ng komunista dyan, ako, lagot na kayo. So, itong mga gobyerno, they're forced to buy in form of aid, in form of different things.
O, tsaka kung bibigyan ka ng second hand, mayroon na naman pwede
Right.
ng
Gawa ng bago. Benta
no?
ng bago.
Dahil binibigyan, kaya yung mga ating mga binibigay sa atin, hindi lang second hand, third hand, fourth hand.
Gamit na. So, but siguro yun yung ma-afford po natin and all. But, that's the way it is. So, it's the threat of war that keeps that, it's the fear of war that keeps it going. Paano kung wala ng fear? Paano if you have a president of the most powerful nation of the earth saying, we don't want war. Peace na tayo. Sinong magagalit sa kanya? Okay, so, fast forward, this is the final speech. We have two more, pero maganda na to end it. It's his final address sa UN 5 days, a week before he flew to Dallas and he was assassinated. So this is a speech at the United Nations.
But I would say to the leaders of the Soviet Union and to their people that if either of our countries is to be fully secure, we need a much better weapon than the H-bomb. A weapon better than ballistic missiles or nuclear submarines, and that better weapon is peaceful cooperation. We have in recent years agreed on a limited test ban treaty, on an emergency communications link between our capitals, on a statement of principles for disarmament, on an increase in cultural exchange, on cooperation in outer space, on the peaceful exploration of the Antarctic, and on tempering last year's crisis over Cuba. I believe, therefore, that the Soviet Union and the United States, together with their allies, can achieve further agreements which spring from our mutual interest in avoiding mutual destruction, There can be no doubt about the agenda of further steps. We must continue to seek agreements on measures which prevent war by accident or miscalculation. We must continue to seek agreement on safeguards against surprise attack, including observation posts at key points. We must continue to seek agreement on further measures to curb the nuclear arms race by controlling the transfer of nuclear weapons, converting fissionable materials to peaceful purposes, and banning underground testing with adequate inspection and enforcement. We must continue to seek agreement on a freer flow of information and people from east to west and west to east. We must continue to seek agreement, encouraged by yesterday's affirmative response to this proposal by the Soviet foreign minister on an arrangement to keep weapons of mass destruction out of outer space. Let us get our negotiators back to the negotiating table to work out a practicable arrangement to this end purposes. Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation, for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon. Space offers no problems of sovereignty. By resolution of this assembly, the members of the United Nations have forsworn any claim to territorial rights in outer space or on celestial bodies, and declared that international law and the United Nations Charter will apply. Why, therefore, should man's first flight to the moon be a matter of national competition? Why should the United States and the Soviet Union, in preparing for such expeditions, become involved in immense duplications of research, construction, and expenditure? The effort to improve the conditions of man, however, is not a task for the few. It is the task of all nations, acting alone, acting in groups, acting in the United Nations. For plague and pestilence and plunder and pollution, the hazards of nature and the hunger of children are the foes of every nation. Has man had such capacity to control his own environment, to end thirst and hunger, to conquer poverty and disease, to banish illiteracy and massive human misery? We have the power to make this the best generation of mankind in the history of the world, or to make it the last. The provision of development assistance by individual nations must go on, but the United Nations also must play a larger role in helping bring to all men the fruits of modern science and industry. A United Nations conference on this subject, held earlier this year at Geneva, opened new vistas for the developing countries. Next year, a United Nations conference on trade will consider the needs of these nations for new markets. And more than 4/5 of the entire United Nations system can be found today mobilizing the weapons of science and technology for the United Nations decade of development. But more can be done. A World Center for Health Communications under the World Health Organization could warn of epidemics and the adverse effects of certain drugs, as well as transmit the results of new experiments and new discoveries. Regional research centers could advance our common medical knowledge and train new scientists and doctors for new nations. A global system of satellites could provide communication and weather information for all corners of the earth. A worldwide program of conservation could protect the forest and wild game preserves now in danger of extinction for all time, improve the marine harvest of food from our oceans, and prevent the contamination of air and water by industrial as well as nuclear pollution. And finally, a worldwide program of farm productivity and food distribution, similar to our country's Food for Peace program, could now give every child the food he needs. New efforts are needed if this Assembly's Declaration of Human Rights, now 15 years old, is to have full meaning. And new means should be found for promoting the free expression and trade of ideas through travel and communication and through increased exchanges of people and books and broadcasts. For as the world renounces the competition of weapons, competition in ideas must flourish. And that competition must be as full and as fair as possible. 2 years ago, I told this body that the United States had proposed and was willing to sign a limited test ban treaty. Today, that treaty has been signed. It will not put an end to war. It will not remove basic conflicts. It will not secure freedom for all, but it can be a lever. And Archimedes, in explaining the principles of the lever, was said to have declared to his friends, "Give me a place where I can stand, and I shall move the world." My fellow inhabitants of this planet, let us take our stand here in this Assembly of Nations, and let us see that if we, in our own time, can move the world to a just and lasting peace,
Alam niyo, kung that was his last speech sa UN.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it was 1 week before they shot him.
No, sorry, September pa yun.
It was September,
Yeah.
but it was about 2 months before they shot him. For those that I would advise for you to go over it again, look for it in YouTube. No? It was the speech of John F. Kennedy in United Nations, September 1963. No? Listen to it again.
Grabe.
Listen to what he was saying. No? And then you will know what the true leader is. No? The true leader of the world. And he was talking about so many things that it's so sad.
Yeah.
That such ideas do not come out of any leader anymore. Since they killed him. Now, we were just talking while the video was going on. Pagkapatay po kay Kennedy, hindi nagtagal, pinatay yung kapatid niya.
1968.
At etong si Martin Luther King. Yung kapatid niya pinatay dahil baka maging presidente. Dahil parehong pag-iisip, si John F. Kennedy tsaka yung kapatid niya si Robert Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy.
Bobby Kennedy. Tapos si Martin Luther King, pinatay din. Kasi he was also talking about peace. At yung unification that basically,
sabi
niya yung not by the
color of your skin,
but by
character.
the character of the person. Yun po yung kanyang sinasabi, which meant this was a way wherein this leader of the black community of the U.S. Was looking for a way how to get that integrated to the whole of the United States.
Civil rights.
And he says, in his, talking about Martin Luther King, in his last speech, no?
Ano yung mountaintop?
In the mountain, I've been to the mountaintop, sabi niya. Gusto sabihin, nakikita na niya ngayon yung kanyang role. Hindi lang po sa bansang Amerika, no?
Yeah.
kundi para sa kabuuan ng mundo
Yeah.
in achieving and providing the ideas for world peace.
Right.
At itong mga taong ito, in just one decade, in a span of 5 years actually, 1963 up to 1968,
Yeah.
tatlong importanteng tao pinatay by assassination. At pagkatapos nito, nakita na natin kung ano ang nangyari sa mundo. Nag-take over na ang mga financial oligarchs, pinalitan nila yung sistemang pananalapi, hinawakan na nila yung mga bangkong malalaki, at gumawa na sila ng paraan para itong mga maliliit na bansa at walang kakayanan ay magiging parang alipin nila.
Population control also.
Lumabas na itong population control.
Ni Kissinger.
Ayan. Lahat po ito lumabas na pagkatapos nilang pinatay itong tatlong tao.
Grabe.
That's why these were the 60s, no? But it's only 5 years of the 60s, 1963 up to 1968.
Right.
Nung sinira nila lahat ng kakayanan ng mundo na nakasalalay dito sa leaders na ito, ang direksyon papuntang kapayapaan.
Parang tinanggal nila yung opposition. No?
Oo. At hindi lang kapuntang at ang kalaban po nila ay itong poverty.
Right.
Ang sinasabi ni
Kennedy.
Kennedy, ito ang kinakailangan. Tapos hindi, sabi niya, wag tayong gagawa ng sistema na magiging alipin ang mga ibang tao. No? What they call the peace of slavery.
Right.
Kung nakuha niya yung anong yon, phrase na yon, not to just achieve the peace of slavery. Meaning, kunwari, mapayapa tayo, pero alipin kayo lahat. Walang nag-aaway, pero alipin kayo lahat. Yun ang sinabi niyang kinakailangang labanan.
Parang ngayon.
And yun nga, ito nga nangyayari sa atin ngayon.
We have the video you want. You want to give an intro?
Meron
So, as a final video, meron pong ni-request si Chairman, he remembered it, which is a good video. It shows the kind of quality of mind again of Kennedy and how leaders should think. You want to?
Malapit na rin po siyang ma-assassinate noon. At nag-speech siya dito sa isang inauguration ng pagtatayo ng dam, no? Ng isang infrastructure. Alam niyo po ang dam, ano ba ang tawag dito sa Tagalog?
What is dam in Tagalog?
I don't know. Ang dam po is major infrastructure kasi hindi lang po nag-provide ng kakayanan para ma-rechannel mo ang tubig sa mga agrikultura sa mga ibang lugar, pero nakaka-generate din po ng kuryente. Hindi lang po isa yan, no? Pero itong project na ito, isa sa mga maraming ginawa nila sa Amerika. Kaya napaka-importante pong pag-isipan natin ito. At meron siyang speech dito na feeling ko lang akma sa atin at sa lahat ng mga nag-iisip ng build.
Yeah.
Ang build po, maski makikita nyo maski sinong presidente sa Amerika, hindi lang yung kalye-kalye, hindi lang yung highway, at hindi yung bridge. No? Yung mga bridge, tsaka yung highway, pang-inaugurate lang, nag-inaugurate dyan, yung mga mayor, mga governor, no? Yan ang mga proyekto nila. Pero pagdating sa infrastruktura tungkol sa enerhiya, energy generation,
Right.
dams, itong malalaking projects na talagang nakakatulong sa malawak, tsaka nagbibigay ng magandang kinabukasan para sa darating na henerasyon. Ito po yung klaseng infrastructure na palagi nating minimension, no? At binibigyan ng pansin
Mm.
sa ating mga usap-usapan,
Mm.
no?
Mm.
So pakinggan niyo po dito ang isang speech ni Kennedy.
It is an honor and a privilege for me to present to you the President of the United States.
Thank you very much. I don't think there is any more valuable lesson for a president or member of the House and Senate than to fly as we have flown today over some of the bleakest land in the United States, and then to come to a river and see what grows next to it, and come to this city, and come to this town, and come to this platform, and know how vitally important water is. I hope that those of us who hold positions of public responsibility in 1962 are as far-seeing about the needs of this country in 1982 and 1992 as those men and women were 30 years ago who began to make this project possible. What are we going to do in 1962, beginning today, to determine what projects we should develop so that by the end of this century, when there are 300 million people in the United States, that there will be available to them land and water and light and power and resources and places to live and places to rest and places to work. So we salute this project today, and we salute those who made it possible. And we look to the future, and we look to the past. And we commit ourselves in 1962 not only to celebrate this project, but to move ahead in all the other areas, stretching from California to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in building this country up. Every member of Congress, everyone in the executive branch, from the President on, in the field of national resources, has to plan during their period of administration or of office for the next generation, because no project that we plan today will be beneficial to us. Anything we begin today is for those who come after us. And just as those who began something years ago make it possible for us to be here, I hope we'll fulfill our responsibility to the next generation that's going to follow us. Those people who come here from abroad, what they want to see is the Tennessee Valley. 10 years from now, they'll want to see this project. And I hope in space and on the ground, this country will continue its march forward. Thank you.
Familiar.
Ganda po, di ba? Ganyan po mag-iisip ang isang leader. Sana po itong ating Pangulo ngayon, mabigyan ng pagkakataon siguro, mapakinggan itong mga ito at mapanood, no? Para baka siya ma-inspire. Tayo po, we are inspired already by this man. But we are also saddened by the fact that we don't have in the horizon any such leader here in the Philippines and also in the United States, of somebody that can lead the world, somebody that can lead our country towards these ideas. No? Our president here does not have to prepare himself to be the leader of the world. But there is a quality of thinking that is available and presented here that is needed for leaders in all nations. Every nation in their choice of leaders must look for these qualities. These people who think in terms of generations, who think in terms of what they can do to destroy poverty, who think in terms of what they can do to achieve peace.
Right.
Not the peace of slavery, but real honest to goodness peace, wherein there is a common objective of the people involved, even inside this country, for the development of the Filipino and the generations to come. This is the quality of thinking that is very, very important. And I hope we have young people who by themselves, after watching this episode of ang Ating Katipunan, will go and do some research themselves. Review the videos that we have presented. Listen to them intently. Get the pointers that are necessary and the ideas necessary, not only for world peace, but to achieve the kind of development that the Philippines sorely needs. This will allow you to redirect your attitudes and your minds, for all you know, towards becoming the true leader of this nation in the years to come. This should inspire you. There is nothing that should inspire you on the type of leaders that we have. No one gets inspired by somebody who curses and who threatens his people by whatever they do. How can you get inspired by that kind of leader? But what you just heard, and we wanted and we enjoyed presenting it to you, are the qualities of a leader, not just for America, but the qualities of a leader for us here. That we still have a chance because meron po tayong kakayanan. Sabi nga nila, lahat naman po tayo merong pag-iisip. Kasi Amerikano ka, Ruso, China, Japan, or Filipino. And there is no limits to our creativity and understanding and our capacity to love. Each of us have that capacity. The capacity to love means to sacrifice. The capacity to have a vision means your imagination as to what your people can achieve and what the country can achieve. And maybe the capacity to visualize your children and your children's children, and even further as to what quality of life they can have because you have done what is right today. Yan po ang ating pong presentasyon. Sana po nagustuhan ninyo. At huwag po kayong matamad o huwag po kayong magbili. Tignan nyo po, research po kayo. Ganito itong, at we advise this one, especially for John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Look for all of his speeches.
Look for his speeches, look for all of the, during the 60s, kasi yun po yung turning point ng mundo eh. And it's very important, very significant for us to see what happened there to determine why are we also in this place now. Anyway, good. Hope you enjoyed it. And now we will read all your comments and comments on our show. Again, this does not reflect the opinions of the people on the show. But in the interest of free speech, we will read them as is. Okay, let's start. Game rocks. Antonio Ducose, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Zenea Arcilia, good evening sa Itos and Sir Butch, listening from Hong Kong. COVID scamdemic, good evening sa lahat. Okay, yung ano. Pilemon de Vera, good evening Sir Butch and Itos, watching from Muntinlupa. Jesus Arabe Karating. Gandang gabi po, pagpalain kayo ng Panginoong Jesus at patuloy na kayo pagkalooban ng mabuting kalusugan at ingatan. Thank you. Gloria Siebert, guten Abend, Sir Butch, Sir Itos, always watching from Germany. Maria Teresa Corpus Balburias, good evening po, Sir Butch, Sir Itos, awaiting more about history. Yan. Emma Mendoza, assassination of Kennedy was conspiracy with the Vatican. Wow. Angeline Rivera, good evening, Sir Butch, Sir Itos, always listening here from Hong Kong. God bless you po. Alfredo Redina, Enola Gay, used in bombing. Yeah. The name of the actual bomb was Big Man and Little Boy yata.
Enola Gay was the
plane.
airplane.
Yeah. Ava Kylie Ru. Good evening, Kabuch, KDP Kabuch and Itos Valdes. Oppenheimer realized to test such the tons of nuclear explosives in the middle of the desert that he stated the epic Mahabharata Arata, the divine war of gods, use of nuclear weapons in the sky. He coined and expressed the military-industrial complex running the country. Cesar Soberano, can you bring it up, please? Cesar Soberano, the Kennedy assassination was signature CIA. FBI operation at the bidding of the military-industrial financial complex, whose money-making ventures would be jeopardized by the peaceful policies of JFK. Quote-unquote, war is business, Smedley Butler, advisor to FDR. John Onyato, good evening Sir Butch and people here in KDP. Mga sirs, history repeats itself. Itong mga global elites na foreign oligarchs, ang kanilang mass destruction nandyan sa pahuna. Ana Galvez, hello po, good evening po sa Prof. Butch Valdes. Virgilio Vera Villanueva, Idol Sir Butch and Sir Ito, salamat po ng marami sa pagpapalawak ng aming kaalaman ng mga masa. Pag tumakbo ulit kayo Sir Butch, iboboto po ulit kayo. Mabuhay po kayo. Marisa Buya, watching from Hong Kong. Ernie Ocampo, good evening po sa inyo, Prof. Butch and Sir Itos. Mabuhay po kayo at ang KDP. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas. Roberto Gariando, kaya pinababalik kay Duterte ang BFA para ihanda tayo sa gulo ng Amerika nang hindi lumabas ang kayaman natin dahil sa maghihirap sila. At magbayad sila ang Amerika sa mga utang nila sa Pilipinas.
Yung VFA po, VFA, Visiting Forces Agreement, kala namin malakas ng loob ni Duterte na hindi niya i-renew, no? Hindi niya i-renew yung VFA. Kasi yung VFA po, Visiting Forces Agreement, ang ginagawa niyan po, parang nilang ginagawang base militar ang Pilipinas. No? At nakita nito ni Duterte. So sabi niya, hindi na niya i-renew yan. So pagdating nung panahon na hindi na-renew, last year pa yan, hindi na-renew, nakatenga lang. Tapos binisita siya ng Amerikano dito, no? Bigla-bigla, nag-uusap silang sandali sa kwarto. Paglabas, balik na naman yung BFA. No?
Jean Cavendish, people should unite now in the Philippines to contradict the abusive power of our government. Ani Serpue, Jella, good evening sa lahat. Ronnie Geronimo, mabuhay po kayo. Nicanor Gatchalian, good evening mga sir, God bless po sa inyo. Predio Redina, number 1, military-industrial complex, war. Testing industrial complex, scamdemic, big pharma. Agriculture industrial complex, GMO, cancer-causing food. Green New Deal, global warming, chemtrail destruction of industry by discarding fossil fuel, oil. All for depopulation, transhumanism, and eugenics.
Tama.
Teresa Pacubas Chan, hi po, God bless. Manag. Good evening sa ito, Sir Butch, sa lahat ng mga viewers dito sa KDP. God bless all. Olive Picar, salute you, sirs, father and son. How blessed your family is, Prof. Butch Valdes, sir. God bless you more. Paring Solomon, ito ba last speech ni Kennedy before assassination? Actually, paring, there is a speech he gave to the Art Center na they changed the name to Kennedy Center after his assassination. And in that speech, he told of the importance of arts in politics. Maganda po yung speech yun. Hindi lang namin na-play kasi sa oras natin. Pero maganda po, pwede nyong i-research yan sa YouTube. Virginia Malonzo, good evening po, sir, and Sir Butch and Sir Itos watching from Pasig. Noel King, JFK Love. Carlo EY, forced vaccination continues. May link si Carlo. Mark Claro, good evening, KDB, Sir Butch, Sir Itos. Stay safe po. Pandemic Delta variant, active na active. Jesse Kaluba, old Bush was a German infiltrator, socialist CIA, one of the those. I don't know that word. But Jesse, you're right. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty kung sino yung mga conspirators sa JFK. Maybe next week we can get into that kasi masalimuot po yan. But we wanted to concentrate on JFK, who he was. And you can tell why he had to be removed by the deep state. Susan Rosales, kaya pinatay siya. Exactly. Arnel Makatbitas, palala ng palala ang ating sitwasyon, sir. Balita namin yung mga DPA di pa nakabakuna, di na pinapasok sa mall dyan sa Manila. Tama. Rhonda Carroll, about lockdown naman ang pag-usapan. Jesse Kaluba, he was a visionary. Mogen Clarito Jeffers, good evening po sa inyong dalawa watching from General Santos City. Liberty Manas, good evening watching from Lapu-Lapu, Cebu. Elma Villegas, gandang gabi sa inyo KTP, nakakainis na mga lockdown na naman tayo. Mabuhay kayo and God bless. Rock PH 10. Ito na ang mas uso ngayon, ang Big Pharma Industrial Complex. Roland Salvador, lahat ng hadlang sa mga kabalerns patay. Violeta Sornes, tama po, we need leaders to bring awakening and leading by Holy Spirit of our God Almighty. Without God, Yahweh, through His Son Jesus Christ, we can do nothing. As if totoo po na Pilipinas ang may dakilang layunin para sa buong mundo. We are God Almighty, Yahweh, chosen children through holy angels and saints. How about Sir Bongbong Marcos kung mabubuksan isip niya at gamitin ang Biblia sa mabuting kapakanan ng buong Pilipino, lalo na po nakasulat sa Biblia. Ang mabuting balita ay ayon kay San Marcos at ginawa po ito ng Ama, Anak at Espiritu Santo para sa Himala. Bago dumating ang Great Decryption, may God bless. Paki-search and study nyo rin po ang Third Secrets of Fatima. Need po ito sa ating Christian's belief. Maraming salamat po. Sunrise, God bless po. Kimi and Dayaptung. Naiyak nga ako sa mag-compare sa inaasahan natin na mumuno noong 2016 sa nangyayaring kabaliktaran niya ngayon. Denial pa rin ako, makontrol pa rin siya. Control pa rin siya. Mabuhay po sa inyong dalawa, Sir Butch and Sir Itos. May God bless us and God bless the Philippines. Francisco Relan, good evening, sir. I'm watching from Pampanga. Manuel Eda, good evening, Sir Butch, Sir Itos. Keep going, mabuhay po kayo. Rodolfo Samson, true to his character, flip-flopping leader si Duterte. Rose Rialada, good evening po sa inyong mga sir. Salamat po, nadagdagan naman po ang natutunan ko. Mabuhay po ang KDP. Bederio Candido Ocelito, magandang gabi po sa inyo, Sir Butch, Sir Itos, mabuhay po ang KDP watching from Riyadh. Crisel Solis watching from Canada. Ricardo Horillo, good evening po. Question po, anong stand nyo sa Butch tungkol sa Delta variant? Ano po ang magandang vaccine? Salamat po.
Alam niyo po kami, ay hindi ko pwedeng mag-recommend sa inyo ng vaccine kasi ako po tsaka ang aking buong pamilya, ang ginagamit po namin ay ivermectin. At hindi po kami magpapabakuna. Hindi po namin alam kung hanggang saan mga mananakot si President Duterte dito. May karapatan po namin alagaan ng aming sariling kalusugan. No? Kayo po, kung gusto niyo magpabakuna, siyempre karapatan niyo din yon. No? Pero hindi po kami naniniwala dito sa lahat na lumalabas ng pinagsasasabi ng IATF tsaka Department of Health na si Duque na kinakailangan tayong magpabakuna dahil bagamat sabihin niya magpabakunang 2 beses, eh, siya rin mga taong nabakunahan ang tinatamaan ng COVID. Tapos ang sabi niya, ang tumatama daw sa kanila ay Delta variant. So pananakot na naman nito sa tao para tuluyan pa rin magpabakuna. No?
Yeah.
Eh, hindi ko na po alam kung anong isipin ko, pero meron pong nag-iisip na iba at ako na rin ay nadadala dyan na etong pagbabakuna ay hindi bumubuhay ng tao. Palagay ko gumagawa sila ng paraan para patayin ng tao at babawasan ang ating populasyon. No? Kung titignan nyo po, palagi nilang inuuna yung mga matatanda. Bakit po yung mga matatanda ang gusto nilang unahin? Bakit po nila sinasabi yung matatanda? Kasi ang matatanda po wala nang silbi sa kanilang paningin. Hindi na sila nagtatrabaho at matanda na sila, pwede na silang mamatay. Kanya tinutulungan na lang nitong mga bakunang ito. Dahil bakit po nila isasalba ang buhay ng mga matatanda? Isipin nyo. Dahil mababait ba sila? Mababait ba ang kanilang puso na gusto nilang mabuhay itong mga matatanda hanggang 100 years old? Maniniwala ba kayo dyan? Paano yung paniniwalaan yan kung ang kanilang mga ibang ginagawa, no? Ay hindi ayon sa ganyang klaseng pag-iisip? They don't have any kind of objective to help the old people. They want to precipitate their demise. They want to precipitate their death in order to depopulate the country. Now, etong mga nabakunahan, mag-ingat po kayo at magbantay po kayo at magbasa kayo. Magbasa kayo. Huwag kayong basta nakikinig dito sa mga mainstream media, sa ANC, sa mga magbasa kayo, nandiyan naman po ang internet. At makikita nyo po dito sa mga iba-ibang mga organisasyon na naglalabas na nagbibigay na sila ng babala. Delikado po sa kanilang paningin ang vaccine.
Okay. Al Garcia, good evening po sa inyo. Nita Patay, Kengkong. Manag. Dapat si Gov Gwen Garcia ang isa sa maging leader natin sa bansa. Ayaw niya ng lockdown at protocol dahil alam niya ang epekto sa mga tao at ekonomiya ng bansa. Naawa ako sa mga kausap ko. Ayaw man nila mag-vaccine, napipilitan sila dahil sa trabaho. Walang vaccine, walang trabaho, walang sweldo, walang kain. Correct. That's the sad part. Pinipilit po tayo dito. So, we hear you. Yung gobyerno natin has been very sad. Sad po. Okay.
Magawa po sila ng paraan para talagang pilitin nila. At siyempre, pag ginawa nila to, gusto sabihin, alam nila na pumapatay sila ng tao at hindi sila sumasalba. Nasa atin na po yan kung paano tayong maninindigan, kung papayagin natin sila. Isa pang tuturukan nila itong mga bata. Kasi ang mga bata, wala din silbi. Gastos lang sa gobyerno ang mga bata. Kasi hindi sila nagtatrabaho, wala silang kakayanan, bata pa kasi. So tuturukan nila yung mga bata. Kayong mga magulang, bantayan nyo ng mabuti. Wala pong pinagkaiba yan dun sa Dengvaxia. Ang mga nagtulak ng Dengvaxia at maraming libong na mamatay dyan sa Dengvaxia, ang unang nagtulak niyan ay walang iba kundi si Duque mismo. kasama si Garin at yung mga iba pa.
Mm.
Ngayon, itong sa COVID, ganyan din. Itutulak niya. Mas grabe pa ngayon. Hindi lang mga bata, yung buong bansa natin. Ang gusto nilang turukan, hindi lang 1 milyon na bata. Ang gusto nilang turukan, 70 o 80 million Filipinos.
Mm.
Kung wala, yan ang tunay na mass destruction. Yung bakuna is a weapon of mass destruction.
Genocide.
Genocide the population. Okay. Hanggang dyan na lang po tayo. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagtangkilik sa ating programa. Sa ngalan po ng ating mga katipon dito sa ating katipunan at sa mga magagaling na staff ng DZXL Radio Mo Nationwide. Kami po ay pansamantalang nagpapaalam at nagpapasalamat na sinamahan niyo kami ngayon, ang ora de peligro ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo dito po sa ating katipunan. Hanggang sa linggo po muli mga katipon, 7 to 9 p.m. Magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat.